Welcome to another of our Wednesday yachting luncheons. It's beautiful here, and to get a little recap of how St. Francis sailors have been sailing around the world, we'll first ask up our Commodore, Commodore Paul Heineken. Come on up, please. News bulletin.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. First, I have to welcome everybody. Welcome to one of Ron's great productions here. Yes, and welcome all of you who are viewing online and around the world. This thing in very tiny font is all a list of names, which I could read off at Ron's suggestion for all the good events that we did. But let me just give you the recaps. Last weekend, we had the San Francisco Cup over across the bay at San Francisco Yacht Club. It's a series of 3 match races between an open class, a women's class, and a kids class. And we were able to bring the trophy home, which is over there on the bar, after having lost it last year. Chris Perkins drove our 105 in the open class, Sarah Kyler in our youth division, and Aaron Brown Cahill in our women's division. Simultaneously, down at Newport Harbor, we had a Grandmasters team race, and we finished second in an amazing fleet. It's like a who's who. The people in the other boats have the bigger names. Things like Menninger, Eisler, Tripp, Perry, Sinks were the competitors. We finished second with Craig and Pam Healy in a boat, Chris Rabb, Mike Bishop in another boat, John Andron and Phil Perkins in the third boat. In fact, Phil flew out after our San Francisco Cup to get down there to sail. Great. And then this weekend, the Baldwin Cup is down in Newport Harbor. It's a 4-on-4 team race, which challenges everyone's arithmetic ability. It's very easy in 3-on-3, but 4-on-4 gets totally chaotic at the finish line. And again, it's like 11 great teams. We have a great team down there that even includes guys like Morgan Larson, who we don't see around very often. So I won't mention every name, but it's really fun. And then the other thing that Bruce Monroe, Staff Commodore Monroe, pointed out is in the double-handed Farallones race last weekend, we had 2 Staff Commodores, each over the 80-year mark, doing extremely well in that race last weekend, out around the Farallon and back with just 1 crew member. So awesome job, Bruce. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Commodore. So let's see a little bit about future speakers. None other than Luke Muller, vying for a berth in the United States Olympic sailing team in the Finn class. He'll be here June 12. May 29, Terry Hutchinson, skipper and executive director of the New York Yacht Club's American Magic Challenge for the America's Cup, will be here. Bill Lynn of the Hershoff Museum will be here on May 8th. Channing Robertson of Stanford, engineer, will be here to talk all about biomimetic design. Who knows what that is? It's learning from nature what we can about modern technology. He'll talk about what nature can teach us about speed. And let's see, April the 17th, Patrick Hunt, the noted Stanford historian, will be here to talk about the nautical surprises of Hannibal. And next week, the award-winning author, Wendy Hinman, will talk about doing 2 laps around the world with her family in a small 31-foot sailboat. Holy moly. A little bit about our speaker today. At the age of 6, his dad put him in a camper and they went zooming from their home just northeast of Fresno down to Bakersfield. He doesn't know if it was public land, private land, doesn't know what, but they started digging around for shark teeth. After all, his father was a dentist. Every dentist wants to find big teeth. So there he was, fiddling around again, at age 7, 8, and 9. And his dad and he would take these trips down there, and he never really kind of let go of that interest in these teeth, although it seemed at the time to be just kind of a hobby and an amusement. He also, in the 90s, started sailing up here on, first it was Joe Casey's Chardonnay, all of us who remembered great Joe Casey, and then on Terry Anderlini's Benino, both of which were Canards, and then someone, Bill Belmont's Fairlawn Clipper, and he met our Courtney Clarkson. And Courtney, who's a good sailor in the Canard fleet, took him under his wing, which wasn't easy because he's 6'5", but she managed to do that and introduced him to people around the yacht club, which is when many of us met him, and they got married here, in '98. But he kept constantly having this dual world of amusements. Now he's playing around with sailboats up here, and he's going back a couple 100 million years to Bakersfield. During all this time, he gradually came to the conclusion that, or the realization that, a lot of this amateur material that he was finding actually had potentially some scientific value, and he'll tell you all about that. So please welcome our own amateur archaeologist, Roy Leggitt. Roy.
Well, thank you, Ron, for that introduction. And yeah, the Bakersfield fossils aren't quite 200 million years old, but they're about 15 million years old. So you're getting there. So I just want to preface this talk to let you know that I have some show and tell here, some of which I'll be picking up and talking about, but you're welcome to come up and take a closer look after my talk. So I'm going to be talking today about California's inland sea, and maybe I could have the PowerPoint up. The California's inland sea is an ancient history that's still alive today, and there are sharks and whales in Bakersfield. Now, you wouldn't really think that. I know one person in the room is actually from Bakersfield, Sharon, and she knows something about this bone bed that's out there. So the Central Valley of California was once an inland sea supporting a tremendous amount of marine life. This inland sea, now known as the Temblor Sea, lasted for about 12.5 million years, finally draining away as plate tectonics lifted the floor of the sea to create the Central Valley and build the Sierra Nevada mountains. At that time, the Coast Range had not yet lifted. So south of here, the peninsula, that was underwater. Probably more south of the peninsula, but yeah, those mountains. Yeah. So remnants of the Temblor Sea continue to reappear in modern times, although now it is freshwater. Our local winter flooding shows up at Yellow Bypass up in Sacramento, sometimes overtaking part of the city itself, and in many national wildlife refuges in the Central Valley, including the Kern National Wildlife Refuge that's pictured here. And in the southern part of the Central Valley, there used to be Tulare Lake. Through the 1800s, in California history, it was the largest body of fresh water west of the Mississippi. During the wet season, it was larger than both the Salton Sea and Lake Tahoe combined. During wet years, Tulare Lake would expand to over 690 square miles and was last mostly filled as recently as 1983. So a lot of those towns in the Central Valley were under a lot of water. Tulare Lake is less likely to refill now due to dams like the Pine Flat Reservoir and the use of water for agriculture. So you see a lot of this, big wide open field. Expansive views in the Bakersfield area with large farms. So this part of Central Valley is mostly about wide open spaces. The locals haven't forgotten about the Temblor Sea. So the name appears in unexpected places, even at bars. So Oildale is about 10 miles north of Bakersfield, and true to its name, there is a lot of oil there. This oil is from the remains of the marine animals that once swam in the Temblor Sea, and it's now extracted from the Kern oil field with over 9,000 active wells. This is the densest concentration of oil wells in the state of California. So the Temblor Sea in the southern part of the Central Valley was lush with marine life. As those animals died, the seabed accumulated and preserved not only the oil, but also the bones of the animals. The remains near Bakersfield are from the middle Miocene period, now about 14.5 to 16.2 million years old, and are still in that ancient seabed that is now known as the Sharktooth Hill bone bed. Many animals from that time were quite different than what we find in the ocean today. There were many sharks, baleen whales, and toothed whales. There was Alodesmus, this critter. He was about 8 feet long, weighed around 800 pounds, and was a relative of modern sea lions. Extinct now. And then there was the Alophyseter sperm whale, which was also in those same waters, and both of those articulated skeletons are at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles County, in the main museum that's right across from USC. They have an incredible collection from this particular bone bed. So that bigger than life shark that we see in the movies, Carcaraly's Megalodon, which is widely known as the Meg, was about the size of a school bus and had teeth up to 7 inches long. The size that is depicted in the movies is exaggerated just a little bit. This animal, of course, now it's extinct, but it was a relative of the great white shark that we, of course, still have. And that megalodon would have been a massive animal, you know, really an impressive animal. Much bigger than the great whites. There were several species of Mako sharks, and the short fin Mako shark, which is this animal right here, we still have this shark today. They are up to about 16 feet long, and they can swim up to about 60 miles an hour. So they pretty much slice and dice whatever they want. These sharks have the largest brain to body mass ratio of any extant shark. So they are not only big and fast, they are also smart. So those of you embarking on the Commodore's cruise with Paul, you may get to see some of these while you're scuba diving down in Fiji. That would be exciting. Yeah, swim the other way. But I don't think you'll go 60 miles an hour, Sharon. So now, consider scaling that fish up to be twice as long with 8 times its body mass and with 3-inch long teeth. And that's called a big tooth mako, which is now extinct. Those teeth are found in this bone bed, including the one that is on the screen there. And I think that this was a really dangerous shark, maybe even more capable than that giant megalodon. You know, smart and fast versus maybe not quite so smart and really big. I think I'd be an easy decision. So the sharks were awesome. They were much bigger than anything we have today. They were diverse and they were numerous. You'll also see that there are a number of shark teeth here. Some are identified, some are not, but I have quite a few that you can take a look at later. There were lots of shark teeth to be found in that ancient seabed of the Temblor Sea. This is from a couple days worth of digging. And these teeth are so beautifully preserved that this area became known as Sharktooth Hill. So the idea of finding shark teeth from these ancient species, particularly being that some of them were simply huge, like a megalodon tooth from the Sharktooth Hill bone bed. I did not find this one. Somebody else did, very close by, but it's not. I have yet to find one of these at my site, but there may be a lucky day. These teeth have captivated a whole class of fossil hunters and commercial interests. These teeth make for some awesome trophies and something to sell on the web. Yes, you can actually buy these fossil shark teeth on eBay. So we look at what I did here with this fossil bed. And in 2014, I had an opportunity to purchase the surface mineral rights, otherwise known as the fossil bed, on a piece of ranch land. For many years, the owner of this ranch had been allowing day diggers to look for shark teeth and other fossils for a fee. And after years of excavation along the edges of the fossil bed, the head wall had increased to a point of being dangerous. And he decided to take off the top of the hill, got some heavy equipment in there, and expose the fossil bed. So in order to pay for this work, he took this portion of the fossil bed and offered some pieces of that for sale as fossil lots. So I bought about 1,000 square feet of fossil bed. I think my wife thought I was a little crazy at that point, but I don't know. Well, that's like admitting I would be crazy. I mean, why would I tell you? She found out soon enough. You know, what do you mean by okay. So the Sharktooth Hill bone bed is full of whales. The bones of these marine mammals are generally far better preserved than with the sharks. And so, since sharks are mostly cartilage, they don't normally fossilize. There have been numerous scientific expeditions since the early 1920s, and many important shark, turtle, bird, and mammal species were first named on the basis of specimens or holotypes that were collected here. You'd think that all the large species would have been found by now. However, pretty much all of the land is privately owned and mostly off limits for digging. Now, those oil companies and ranches, they're just off limits. So a lot of excavation has been done by hobbyists and not scientists. The fossil bed is now about 850 feet above sea level at the site where my fossil lot is, which is depicted right here in the center of the screen with those tools. So it's about 850 feet above sea level and is above the Kern River on the north side of the river. And the land is eroded away and exposed the lifted and tilted fossil bed as a band wrapping around the hills. Most fossil hunting is preceded by digging into this exposure at the edge, pretty much just breaking up all the bones to get at the shark teeth. Now that I own an undisturbed fossil bed, I have a distinct opportunity to remove the upper layers, or the strata, and look at the bones as a layer. So that becomes that. In cases where bones are articulated or closely associated, individuals can sometimes be reconstructed. Each new species discovered helps to paint more of the picture of the environment that existed during that time. So, these whales. In November of 2017, I headed down to camp on the ranch and do some digging. As you can see, it's a beautiful place. And yeah, sure, I'm camping with the scorpions and rattlesnakes, but it's fun. Actually, yeah, the red bull was not so fun last time I was down there. But anyway, a real live red bull, like 1,500 pounds, yeah. Because it is open land for ranching, so it comes with the territory, you know. So at this point, I was maybe 70% trophy hunter, 30% scientist. I have a scientific background and training, but you know, I assumed that most bones would be a jumble and not articulated or particularly valuable to science, since that was the general approach of other quote-unquote diggers that I'd encountered. But boy, was I wrong. Fate would have it that a pack of 4 people from the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County showed up unannounced. What are the odds of that? And Dr. Larry Barnes, curator emeritus for the Natural History Museum, was among these guys. He was contagiously scientific in his approach. Not just identification, but trying to understand the big picture issues. He was scouting around for red concretions. This is a red concretion. Basically a big roundish concrete-like chunk And although they might have something in them, like a bone, for instance, the typical fossil digger just saw them as big, hard, heavy problems interfering with their quest to find shark teeth. So Dr. Barnes had discovered that the red-type concretions had articulated bones in them. These red concretions were scientifically important, but he also theorized that they comprised another distinct layer of fossils that was above and separate from the typical bone bed. So I invited him to come explore my bit of the fossil bed, looking at the red concretions, and we surveyed them. Turns out that one of these big red concretions on my lot was a nearly intact baleen whale skull. That's what's here in this picture. Dr. Barnes was immediately interested in it and wanted it for the museum. All the important parts were there: the entire cranial cavity and the bones from both ears. They have a communication ear and an echolocation ear. And you can see the bits and pieces on the end of the skull there. So with all these parts present in the same individual, this skull was essentially a Rosetta Stone for its species. Most whale species have been distinguished from others by comparison of just one of these parts. To have all three parts present in one individual would allow for known differences to be reconciled for many other individuals. Dr. Barnes does not yet know if this is a new species or not, but it will, in any case, provide much scientifically important information on its own species and help determine what separates other species. So I was instantly hooked on the scientific value and importance of the site for the bones. The idea of trophy hunting just didn't cut it anymore. I decided to be part of the scientific community and resolved to donate to appropriate museums the whale skull and anything else that would benefit science. So out of those 4 people, I kept in touch with Mick Persian. He's the guy on the right. And he was one of the 4 that had shown up that first day. And we set up a summer visit to retrieve the baleen skull with the help of Gene Thatcher, who's in the background there, and Mick's banker, who's facing away from us. So I guess Mick must have said something like, I'd like to make a deposit with $100 cash back, and if you're interested, you can come join me to retrieve a 50 million year old whale skull on your day off. I don't know. I mean, must have been kind of how the conversation went with the teller. I don't know. But anyway, they were all very interested in getting the skull, so here we are. So Gene proved to be an experienced equipment operator and could drive this green tractor that you see and drag the skull off. And he's a great guy who, well, as you see, the skull ended up breaking in half in the course of trying to move it. But, you know, these things happen. It's a 1,000-pound rock. But we had all the pieces, so that was important. They could be reassembled and made it a little more manageable. Gene took the snout end in a wheelbarrow and then used the tractor for the rest of the skull and got it loaded up into Mick's truck. So paleontology requires a skilled preparator with a laboratory, and Mick was and is that person. And he, as a volunteer, has worked for 35 years at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles County, and he's also volunteered to do the preparation on this enormous skull. So this is the back end as he's beginning to work on it, and it's still in process, but he's cleaned off part of it and is restoring it as he goes. So in November of 2018, which was not that long ago, I headed down to camp on the ranch and do some digging. I showed up. After about 3 hours of work, I found this. So this is a piece of a large mandible with teeth in it. Fortunately, This pretty much just dropped out as I was digging with some heavy tools and was mostly intact. Some of the points of the teeth broke, but it didn't get crushed or damaged badly. And anytime you're using a heavy or large tool, you have a lot of potential to ruin stuff. So fortunately, I knew enough to stop and get a hold of the museum people. So it was cleaned up a little bit here, and I also have a cast of that right here that you're free to take a look at. The original is down at the Natural History Museum in LA. I certainly can. So this is the cast of the original discovery piece. There we are. So yeah, it has 5 teeth in it and places for 4 others. And we also found in the course of excavating many of the other teeth. So a couple photos and a text message later, the word spread like wildfire, and I was deemed, quote unquote, the luckiest guy I know by my friend Mick. I think lucky maybe because I didn't ruin something, but also lucky because I found something. So, but admittedly, this is something that no one had ever found before. So Dr. Barnes, pictured here, he headed back from a Utah dinosaur excavation and came straight to my lot. He'd been looking for a find like this at this site his entire career. He had seen hundreds of teeth, but never teeth in a mandible or a palate from this site. And waiting for something since 1972 was a very long wait. So 2 days later, we had additional pieces, and some of them broken and needed reassembly, some of those being discrete teeth. And what turned out to be a very important section of the right mandible, because it has the hinge point or the condyle present, which is very important for identification of these things, or it's important to describe them scientifically. And many loose teeth. So you can see there's a clump of dirt there, and there, you can see 3 of the teeth sticking out of that one little clump of dirt. There was another 4th tooth on the back side as well, all in a little fist-sized piece. And out of the clump of dirt, the teeth look something like this one below. In different positions, they all have different curvature, but they're all pointy like that. So Mick worked with me. We took out a number of pieces of matrix. I ended up finding also some vertebra, including the atlas vertebra, some other pieces of vertebra, and this piece, which is another vertebra. And this big piece of matrix, Mick took this back to his lab, and he found another section of the same jaw with more teeth in it. So we knew we were onto something, and there was no question that it was an important find. Nobody, even now, really knows exactly what it is. In January of this year, I went back down for 4 more days, and Mick and Jean came out and assisted me, and had their compressor and air tools. I had my eye on a bone, which is this bone kind of in the middle of the image. And I partially excavated it back in November. I was hoping that it was another section of a mandible. After removing some overburden, I started finding teeth in the bone. And it was clear that I had the other mandible, the left one. So after excavating all day, as the sun was low in the sky, I had the left mandible excavated and on a pedestal, took photos, and It's ready to move it into wrappers in a box. So formal research and publication are still in works, but it looks like this will be described as a new species. This is an odontocete, which is a toothed whale, and would have been similar to a dolphin, but over 10 meters long and 10 times as massive. So it was one of the macro predators of the time. So there's a kind of a mock-up of how it might reassemble. So in our local natural history museum, the Cal Academy, they have a few shark teeth from my collection that are on loan there. This is a picture of them in a case. They can be seen in the Giants of Land and Sea exhibit, in a case of fossils beneath the blue whale skeleton. So if you make it over there, you can check out the dozen or so fossils they have, including some shark teeth. So as time goes by, my skills are getting better in the field as a preparator. I've also learned that you simply cannot preserve everything, and not everything is worth preserving. Other things are priceless and important links to understanding the past. By far, most individuals head out to dig fossils at this site are there to find shark teeth. If a cool bone turns up like a vertebra, maybe they'll take that home too and place it on their desk or mantle, partly because they are just out for the day. But there's little, if any, documentation, no context or consideration for nearby fossils, and they probably have little or no knowledge of the species that are found there. Most amateur fossil hunters take home trophies. Yes, that's me with a pink BB gun trying to take home a trophy. But overlook or destroy almost all the scientific value. So the process of building on the science of paleontology carries with it a sense of duty and responsibility towards the time and the place that has been preserved. Through happenstance, a small part of the history has ended up under my control. And it is a privilege to be able to participate and contribute directly to the scientific body of knowledge. It is this sort of endeavor that museums are finding it harder and harder to be able to do without a benefactor. Much land is in private hands, has been developed, is used industrially, or is not otherwise protected and available to science. There is little in the budget for field work, and some of the major collections don't even have curatorial staff or active research. There is also a priority given to what the public wants to see, and that is currently around dinosaurs. The natural history of California is diverse and surprising. After all, who would look for whales in Bakersfield except maybe you? So it's a surprise. And I want to give some special thanks to, of course, Courtney Clarkson, my wife, for tolerating me having many old bones in the house, including my own. Rob Ernst, who made the fossil bed available to me. Dr. Larry Barnes, PhD, for his many contributions to science, his ongoing passion for the Sharktooth Hill bone bed, and his generosity with his time and resources. Mick Persian for his considerable generosity in contributing his experience in the field and as a preparator. Gene Thatcher for his considerable assistance in the field. And then Vanessa Rue, who is the collections manager, and others, the other vertebrate paleontology staff down at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, who've opened the door to their collection and made it possible for me to learn conservation and preparation. So that is the end of my slideshow. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome again to our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Our guest speaker today is Roy Leggitt. He is a arborist, a sailor, and now an amateur paleontologist. Roy, wonderful to have you here. how big was the animal this came from? And tell us a little bit about what this is a casting of.
That is a piece of the right mandible. So the mandibles are the jaws, or the lower.
Kind of right here.
Yeah, it's right there.
Would this,
Yeah.
would Dewey Hines, if he had these teeth, fit like this?
Yeah, you turn it around the other way though. 'Cause
Like
the teeth,
this?
The teeth, no.
Like this?
No. You got it all wrong, Ron.
I know.
You got the.
I'm
you
so
gotta have
bad
the
with
teeth
my
pointing
teeth.
in towards the lingual side.
Oh, but it looks like it's going out like that. Dewey's teeth go out like
it
that.
does go. It actually does go out like that. These quote unquote dolphins, or animals with a dolphin-like skull, they have a jaw that bows in and then goes kind of straight out.
That
Kind of
explains it.
pointy
Right.
snout. So that's why they have those snouts,
Uh-huh.
And so the teeth are very pointed and sharp, and they curve inward from both sides.
And this is a casting of the fossil that you found. Am I getting
That
this
is a
correct?
cast.
And this is, what is the material this casting is made of?
I didn't make the casting. We'd have to ask Mick that question.
And the coloration on the casting, that was added because a craftsman looked at the actual fossil and copied it in the coloration here?
That's actually Mick's artwork.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's all about Mick.
Uh-huh.
He's a very skilled preparator,
Uh-huh.
and he paints fossils that are castings of fossils. Mick is in Los Angeles.
Make the artist,
Yeah,
okay.
he didn't come up here today.
Now, how long ago was this animal alive down there in Bakersfield? He's older than a lot of our members, I know, but how
A
old?
little older than our oldest member. Yeah.
15 million years ago, 10 million?
Yeah.
We have old
50
members, remember?
Yeah, we do. The deposit is as old as about 16.2 million years. The oldest, the bottom
16.2.
of the strata.
16.2. Those of us who guessed 16 were way off.
Oh yeah, way off. That's 200,000 years short.
That's
Come
right,
on.
exactly.
So, this was not at the very bottom of the bone bed, but it was pretty close. So,
How deep was this when you found this?
well, you got to remember, 35 feet of the hill was cut down by tractors. So,
Uh-huh.
I had to excavate down probably about 4 feet from the surface of my lot to find this. Now, as far as the age of it, the deeper you go, the older it gets. So I would guess this was 15 to 16 million years old,
Mhm.
based on its position.
Now, for those of us who live in California and have been in the Central Valley, you said that it was the area where you now are is 850 feet above present sea level?
Yes.
So in other words, the sea level was 800 feet higher at the time, 18, 17 million years ago, when this animal was around?
No. The sea level is the sea level, right? I
Okay.
mean, it changes with ice melting or
Uh-huh.
freezing.
But I'm saying,
But-
if that was the bottom of the ocean or the bay, the inland sea at that time,
this,
because it went up and down for
Yeah, but
plate
this-
tectonics.
this is plate tectonics. We
Okay.
have the Pacific plate and the North American plate colliding.
Mhm.
Therefore, we have the Sierra Nevada, and we have the highest points in the Sierra Nevada in Kern County or at the edge of Kern County on the east side. That's where we have Mount Whitney.
Does this massive east-west collision explain Berkeley?
Well, I'm not sure what explains Berkeley.
As a graduate yourself.
No, I'm not a grad from there, but my wife is. So
Now, we're going to have some questions from the audience. And so we enjoy questions from the audience. Wave your hand, and John will bring you the mic. First off is our naval architect, Paul Kamen. Paul.
Looking at these giant toothed mammals and the giant sharks, it suggests that there was a niche in the ecological food chain that supported them 15 million years ago, but faded, that caused them to go extinct. In other words, the niche didn't survive the uplift and the destruction of the inland sea. What was one level down on the food chain? In other words, what were these giant teeth chomping on to support these giant species?
Well, that's a great question. There are a lot of marine mammal fossils, so I think we had a considerable amount of biodiversity in the sea at that time. The museums are full of different kinds of marine mammals. A big dolphin like this and Ron had asked me how big it is, and I don't honestly know exactly how big it is, but probably in the 35 to 40 foot range. And, we don't have dolphins that big now. Nowhere near that big.
So they were eating smaller. Paul wants to know: were they eating smaller dolphins? Were they eating squid? We have any notions?
Yeah, well, they're I have some whale ear bones over there, not from these particular whales I talked about, but there are a lot of different marine mammals that are found here, and a lot of different species, including pinnipeds, like that Alodesmus that's in the museum hanging from the ceiling. And so I think the next step down in the food chain from the macropredator, like this big odontocete whale, this dolphin-like whale, would have been things like the Alodesmus and the relatives or ancestors of sea lions and seals and those kind of animals.
Yeah. Also big enough to require the predators to be that big to go after them.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder about exactly the interaction with all these macro predators, the huge sharks and these big whales, everybody well armed. The baleen whales were smaller than what we have today. They were generally on the smaller side, and the sharks were generally on the bigger side. But these toothed whales, now we know, based on this finding, could become really large.
Yes, we have another question. Bruce Monroe.
Yeah, so.
Staff Commodore Bruce Monroe.
Back when your friend there was swimming around in Bakersfield, how deep do you figure the seawater was at that time?
Well, the general consensus, because there were so many really big whales and big animals were in there all the time, what I've heard is that the sea level or the sea depth would have been a couple 100 feet deep. So that plus 850 means more than 1,000 feet of lift of the seabed since that time. So, there's also a lot of sediment that's filled in the Central Valley. So that might have been deep water and deeper than we think.
Yes, another question from the audience. Yes.
Hi, Roy. When the original owner took the top off of the hill, do you think a lot of fossils were lost then, and where did that dirt go?
Well, the dirt became a nice parking pad. So, but the fossils aren't found above the seabed. There are fossils potentially found in the area just above the seabed, and they're land animals or animals that came later or maybe washed in. So there are possibly articulated skeletons to be found in some of the upper layers, but not in that uppermost part that was removed.
How many hours are you spending currently doing this? Courtney's not listening. A week or a month?
The whole job would be so much faster. She'd just come down there and work the pick and shovel for me, but no luck.
Are you spending 10 hours a week? You're spending
I go down there 2 or 3 times a year for maybe 4 or 5 days max each time.
Honest.
Yeah. It's a 5-hour ride to get there one way, and then I camp. I like being the Indiana Jones of Bakersfield for a few days. I don't know. So I do that.
What's the biggest scorpion you've seen?
Yeah, I found a scorpion there that was pretty amazing. It was probably 4 inches long, very thick-bodied, kind of a almost transparent fluorescent green. And you can see the black insides of the thing while it was alive. It was kind of amazing.
Any evidence that there used to be scorpions, big scorpions?
I haven't found one.
Okay. Another question from the audience. Our Commodore, Paul Heineken.
Well, actually, 2 questions. One is, it looks like a clay limestone. What is the rock that you're in? And what were the conditions above it that was bringing all that down? And the second piece of that is that a particularly high density bone graveyard? And if so, what were the conditions that made them all form there? Or is that just what you expect the whole bottom of the ocean looked like?
Well, I think I'll answer your second question first. The this fossil site, it was discovered in 1853 when they were surveying for a railroad location, and bones were sent to a guy named Agassiz, who was a famous paleontologist from the 1850s and 60s, and there were many very important bones found from this location. The location now is understood to be probably the finest location for fossils from this time period in the entire world that are marine fossils. Now there are other Miocene fossil sites, places like Nebraska, but they're not marine fossils, they're land animals. There's one other very good marine fossil site from the Middle Miocene, which is in Morocco. It's mostly quarried for other reasons, or poorly quarried just for trophy hunting, you know, stuff to sell. But this is probably the best in the world. And it's really a silt deposit. The seabed itself is comprised of silt. I made the mistake of going out there and camping when it rained once. When the mud is 3 or 4 inches thick on the bottom of everything that touches it, and it is basically glue, you discover that's a bad idea. And you actually don't find very many fossils in that. So I gave that venture up. I don't go back when it's wet or has been wet. And all of that material is from the Sierra Nevada. It's the mountains. It's what the mountains used to be millions of years ago. And one thing that has been studied, and I am very fascinated with, are the pebbles. And I have a jar of pebbles, citrine, amethyst, all kinds of stones that I find there that are mixed into the silt, and they're all water washed and rounded.
So are you digging, or do you have helpers who dig? Tell me about your process.
Well,
Tell us about
it
your
depends if you're volunteering, Ron.
Did it look like my hand went up, Roy?
Yeah, it did, very briefly. I could have
That's good.
sworn it went up.
So you're also good at recruiting, we can tell.
I try. You know, certain people, like you know, my associate Aaron, you know, he has a standing offer to come down anytime he wants on his free time, but he doesn't want to go down and, you know, bake in Bakersfield and use heavy digging tools, I guess. Can't exactly blame him.
So are you using? Are you?
I do it all. I like doing a lot of it myself. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But Mick and Gene, they're great. They have compressors and air tools, and you know, you don't actually have to swing heavy picks over your head and break things up.
And so, what are the tools of your craft when you're doing this?
Well, everything from a sledgehammer to a pick is, you know, those are hand tools that are used, but you have to be careful because you don't want to ruin the stuff. You know, the excavators and loaders, heavy equipment is used in fossil excavation, and sometimes, you know, even blasting is used in dinosaur sites where there's consolidated rock. So you have to move mountains to get at fossils sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's not a simple process of dental picks and toothbrushes. Even though I have those too.
We have another question from the audience.
Roy, thank you, and thank your father for starting this whole thing. I was curious if any of these shark's teeth that have, you know, lasted all these years could be like decomposed and used for something, like even teeth now, or, you know, some sort of art material or whatever.
There are a lot of people that are making jewelry out of things like this. And there are people that collect, you know, they have collections. Some of these teeth can be very colorful, marbled looking. Others can be pure white. Most of what I have with me today, which you're all free to take a look at the fossils over there and pick them up, and I can explain what they are. Yeah, a lot of these are somewhere in the tan to beige range. Some of them have some purple or bluish colors in them. And then some of them are more blue than tan. depending on the specific location they come from. And the colorful ones especially, people tend to really like in jewelry. You know, they are fossils, so they're somewhat fragile, and it's probably ideal to think first about what is of particular value to a museum collection. There are so many shark teeth that have been removed. I don't think that those are probably that important to museum collections. And if they're used in jewelry, I don't think it would be a real problem.
So since you're always wanting to raise money for your activities as well, and these are very sharp teeth, would you allow a senior member of the yacht club to maybe wear one of these for a while? Dewey, this would fit. This is very sharp. These will work.
Well, I think anybody who wants to tear up, you know, living fish and swallow them semi-whole, they can borrow this at any time.
We've got big members here.
We have some hungry people too.
Okay, Julia, tell us about questions we may have or comments from the Ethernet.
Yeah, we have one very active and interested person whom I don't know, and maybe you do, is Matt Murray.
I think I do know who that is.
And he's been in conversation all through it. And he says, big, beautiful tooth Mako. And then the color on the Temblor teeth are just wonderful, much better than a lot of Florida fossil teeth. And he said, wow, that's fantastic, the second jaw find. And goes on to ask a question, which is, what tool did Roy use to excavate the mandible? What care was needed to extract the mandible without crumbling it?
That's a great question. A generator, a compressor, and then a set of air tools that are handheld, and there are large ones and really small ones, and they're like little jackhammers. But I took a lot of time when I figured out what I had there, and I spent all day to take out a 27-centimeter long mandible because I didn't want it being broken or disturbed at all. So I used a small tool and took it very slowly, and used a tarp and kind of protected it while the heavier work was done above. And then
Patience.
a lot of patience, yeah. But once you know that you have something that's really worth saving and, you know, invaluable, something that people need to be able to preserve as best as possible.
How do you know what's valuable?
You know, how do you know what's valuable? That's a really good question because I don't always know. Mick found a bone which was basically one of the arm bones, or you know, connecting a flipper to an animal, of a pygmy sea lion. And he knew what it was. I wouldn't have known what it was. It was in that great big chunk of dirt that we took out. And so that was a really rare bone to find, a very rare animal. So yeah, part of it is experience, but also just taking it slowly and cautiously so that you don't ruin things before you can figure it out.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it is.
So now, Roy, while this is a casting of a fossil, tell us how fossils are made. I mean, clearly the ivory from the teeth, and were these ivory teeth back, 15 million years ago? And then separately, so that's two questions, what was the teeth made of way back when? And then talk about the difference between the actual object, which is fossilized, and the fossil.
Well, fossils are generally considered to be rocks, not bones, from a geologist's perspective.
And they're formed by?
What was there is replaced. So it's kind of, this is kind of a cast of a cast in a sense, because a fossil is kind of it's a replacement process.
So there's the original object. That object gets covered in mud or some other surface, and then inside it, as that decays, it gets replaced by new material, new mineral material, and that becomes the fossil?
That's generally the case. There are exceptions to that. If you take a look at some of those fossils that I brought in, pick up and handle some of the loose shark teeth in there.
So those
They
are
have-
actual fossils. Well,
Yeah.
this is a casting.
That's a cast of a fossil.
Right.
But the real fossils, look,
Yes. There you go.
yeah, look at the real fossils over there, and you'll
Right.
see that on those shark teeth, they have what to me looks like enamel, just like you would find in any tooth today.
I saw that. That's why I'm asking.
They really, I don't think that enamel is replaced. I think it's the real deal. It's the enamel from back then.
So that's, in fact, that would not be a fossil. That's actually a piece of enamel that's X million years old.
Well, fossils don't have to be replaced.
Okay.
A
You'll
good
it's still technically a fossil,
Yeah.
even if it's the original material.
Look at, I mean, this is getting into movie land again, but you know, the idea of things being preserved in amber, such as a famous movie called Jurassic Park from 25 years ago.
Oh.
Those are not replacement fossils, but they're still, you know, these ancient remains that are preserved.
Great.
So, yeah, certain remains are not 100% replaced.
Do you dream about having a role in the next Jurassic Park ride?
Boy, you have no idea, especially after that Red Bull back in January. That was 3 feet from my tent. I sleep in basically a backpacking tent on the ground.
Uh-huh.
And he was literally, I saw the hoof prints in the morning. He was literally 3 feet from my head and bellowing. I swear, it was T-Rex.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Thatcher.
Yeah,
Thatcher.
hi, Roy. So you own 5,000 or have rights to 5,000 square feet. How do you protect that when you're not there? Are people, can people go onto your lot and hack and hew and get, you know, shark's teeth for their own amusement and wreck what you're doing? And you know, is that a problem for you?
Well, you know, yeah, it's only 1,000 square feet, but you know, 5 feet deep and 1,000 square feet, that's a lot of dirt to go through. I mean, that's plenty. I don't need more than 1,000. But this is on a ranch. The ranch is fenced. It has a gate and a padlock. You need a combination to get in. And then there's another fence that's around these fossil lots, which is chain link. So and whenever anybody comes onto the ranch, like a busload of school kids, because the owner does encourage programs for people to come out and have exposure to the natural history of the area. And so when Rob has people come out, they're supervised. Nobody's just wandering in. So other people that own fossil lots, they have their own big problem of their 1,000 square feet or whatever it is. So they don't need to come on my lot. And we haven't had any sort of trespass issues that I'm aware of.
We have another question from Wednesday Yachting Luncheon Vice Chair Kathy Trafton. Kathy.
Roy, thank you for being here today. It is amazing to me the number of fossils you have found in that little 1,000 square feet lot, considering how infrequently you're down there. So I wonder what else is there. And I'm wondering if you've ever been approached by a university. I mean, to me, it seems like students would be thrilled to be in there with their toothbrushes and whatever, looking through that land, helping you. And have you ever thought about having a group like that come in?
Well, I have kind of gone the direction of inviting the museum people in. So, you know, Natural History Museum, Los Angeles County, they're kind of my research team. As far as the idea of bringing, say, grad students in or something along those lines, I would be open to that. Except I wouldn't want to introduce a certain extraction process that would interfere with the existing kind of measured study that's going on right now. So hopefully others will choose to do that.
So I want to take this moment to acknowledge all the great people who work on our Wednesday Yachting Luncheon program. You've just heard a question from Kathy Trafton. We should also recognize the immensely talented Tom Eamon and Julia Whittakin and Brian Busalaki, who's handling the camera, and John Bechtel, who's handling the mic. So I want to thank you guys because the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon has grown dramatically through your help in the last year and a quarter since we've been doing these broadcasts. So that's great. We have a last question from Jimmy DeWitt, Mallory Cup winning Jimmy DeWitt. Jimmy. Mike,
must have missed something. I
40 million years ago.
I know. It's you call it an inland sea.
Yeah, the Temblor Sea is in the location where the Great Central Valley is today.
Okay, and it was saltwater.
It was saltwater.
And it got there how?
Well,
The gate wasn't there to let it in, was it?
it didn't come through the gate. No, this wasn't the passage. The passage was roughly in the area of Monterey and south of there. It was a wide opening.
Ah,
The Coast Range hadn't lifted up. So the
Okay.
Coast Range lifted up after this period. So the coastline of the Pacific Ocean went up to the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains. That's where this is.
great. These are, I think, one of the deepest places in the ocean is off of Monterey, where the all that water ran out and dug a big ditch.
You're right. Yeah, there's an enormous canyon in Monterey.
And so that's where some of this water for the inland sea came from once
Yeah,
upon a time.
that's where the opening was.
Thank you for straightening me out.
No, that's fine. That was a great question.
So thank you for joining the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Our guest today has been amateur paleontologist Roy Leggitt. It's terrific. Our speaker, Wendy Hinman, will be here next week to talk about going around the world on a 31-foot boat with her family. And Roy, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, the luncheon is adjourned. Good on you, Nate. Much fun. Terrific. Absolutely. Jimmy, the win.